What's up, everybody? My name is Adam Palmer. This is Daily Nonsense. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the rising prices of the Griffey cards and what that can mean for other cards within the sports card industry. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you are a new viewer, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any future Daily Nonsense content. Let's get into it. One of the questions that I think was most on people's mind after the Jordan Kobe sale a couple weeks ago was how was this going to affect the market? And I kind of touched on this around the sale. Like, I thought certain players would go up, and it looks like we have seen one of these certain cards that has seen a pretty big increase. And this is a card that Gio actually talked about. I think it was last Friday. It is the 1989 PSA 10 Ken Griffey. We have seen that jump from like a $2,500 card to like a $4,000 card in a pretty quick time span. That card specifically, I probably would put on the Mount Rushmore of best sports cards of all time. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any, but that's always one that, like, if I were to be ranking, a top 10 or a top 5, that's definitely going to be one that's on there. And it, in some ways, surprises me that it is such a valuable card. Now, maybe it could be because it is a card that is very hard to grade. I believe it has a very low pop count from PSA. So the PSA 10s versus some of the other cards are a little bit harder to find. But if you look up like 1989 Griffies in any of the companies, whether it's Upper Deck or Topps or any of the other companies that were making Griffies back then, he is one of the most graded players probably of all time, other than Wembanyama. I think Wembanyama's Prism card actually recently broke the record for most total graded card. And the Griffey, like I said, is just one that on one hand, I'm surprised that it's such a valuable card. On the other hand, I'm like, Ken Griffey Jr. might be like the most iconic baseball player of all time. I think you could put Mickey Mantle in there, maybe Babe Ruth. Trout, probably prime Trout, I think also fits into that category. Ohtani probably will end up fitting into that category at the end of his career. But I think Griffey, from maybe it's my standpoint, or maybe it's even people who are older than me, like, he was just a player that he was doing things that no one had really ever seen before. So his rookie cards were obviously going to be ones that were super highly desired. And even still to this day, they are still some of the cards that, like, if people are getting back into sports cards, there's probably a decent shot that they're going to start with one of the Griffies. One of my pieces of analysis, was that I thought that the iconic players, the GOATs, were going to be the ones that really saw a high uptick in their sports card prices based on that Jordan and the Kobe sale. And the Griffey, I think, is maybe the start of it. I guess we'll see over the course of like the next couple years, or maybe next couple months necessarily, because I don't know how many years ahead people are really looking forward. And so, friend of the channel, Chris Sewell, was doing like a Q&A on his YouTube channel, and someone asked him about his thoughts on the market, and I thought he put it pretty well. He was saying that he's been in this industry for like 30 plus years, and that there's been upticks, there's been downticks. And I think that is one of the things that I don't want to call it necessarily the original set of content creators that kind of got in 2018, which, I mean, I was one of those people, and there was tons of podcasts and content being created. That was a time where those people maybe hadn't seen a huge decrease. They had only been seeing increases. And for me, up until 2022, 2023, there really was not a time where I was in the industry and had seen card prices drop. Obviously, if you look at the market as a whole, things go up and things go down. This is one of the things that Chris was saying also, is that there are just going to be times where the market goes up and the market goes down. It's never necessarily a stagnant market. And for me, this is sort of the second cycle that I've seen personally. And I think, like, the GOATs of all time, those are the ones that are going to see the first uptick at least. And now, do I think at the end of this cycle, do I think we're going to see a downturn? Again, I think that if we do see a decrease in pricing, like, I think we're going to have to see some sort of crazy financial crisis for there to be like a really significant downturn in cards. Do I think that there will be a downturn in the market overall? I mean, yeah, probably. It's hard for any market really to sustain how hot it has been the way that sports cards have. But other two goats, in my opinion, that are seeing some of their cards increase are Messi and Ronaldo. And I talked about this, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, when there was the $1 million Messi that was a PSA 10 and had the silver NBA sticker on it. There are two more. There's another PSA 10. There's another PSA 10 Ronaldo, and there's another PSA 10 Messi. I think the Ronaldo is on alt, and I think the Messi is either on Golden or Fanatics Collects. Those cards are going to be starting soon. The auctions for those cards, at least. So, and I think that those two cards are going to be a better gauge on the soccer market than maybe the previous two sales of those two cards. Soccer as a whole, I feel like is one that is still, it feels new, even though like there have been cards being created like in sort of this cycle. We started seeing much more soccer cards being created in the middle of that, like in the 2018, 2019. That's when we saw like, the Mbappe Prism card. Again, soccer is maybe a topic similar to yesterday's where I was talking about NFTs, where people just don't really want to get into it. I think it's a fun sport. I think it's something that you should be looking into if you are into sports cards to make money. I think that taking a look at some of these markets is what you need to do if you are trying to make money. If you're just collecting, collect what you like. And that's sort of the thing with sports cards. It's like, that's one of the great parts. It's like, if you don't want to look into soccer, you don't want to collect soccer, that's totally fine. But if you are somebody who is making money in this industry, you probably need to look into smaller markets or markets that maybe you don't have the knowledge of, just so that way you at least have you at least have some eyes on what's going on in those markets. And if you look at like a lot of the indexes, for example, soccer is at the top of those indexes. I don't know if it's because of some of these Messi sales. Like, I would say probably similar to like the Kobe and Jordan. When the top cards in a market sell, you typically do tend to see other cards within that same niche sell for like a pretty decent amount. So like, we are seeing some of the other, Yamani Mall, for example, Holland, like all of these players who are younger and not the Messis and Ronaldos. I think you will continue to see their cards increase because for them, they don't have a lot of their PSA 10 rookies, which I think is another reason why that those cards are interesting to look into. But I think the prospecting and the just overall market for soccer is very similar to baseball, because the way that prospecting works in that sport is the structure of like a player playing for a club in soccer is similar to a player playing for a minor league team in the MLB. Like, there are these minor leagues, there's double A, triple A, single A. And in soccer, there's the MLS. There are other smaller leagues around the world that these players play in. And it's very similar to the MLB. You have a player who kind of works their way up. And in soccer, it's a little bit different because you switch teams. You could go to different countries and play. Like, for example, Christian Pulisic, the USA captain, he went to Germany when he was 14 or 15, I believe, to play for Dortmund, which is in the Bundesliga, which is one of like the top 5 leagues in the world. But then he goes to Chelsea in the English Premier League after that. And now I believe he plays for AC Milan in La Liga. No, not La Liga, Serie A, which is the Italian league. Again, I think it's Serie A, La Liga, which is the Spanish league, the Bundesliga, which is the German league, the EPL. And then there's one other one that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But those are like the big leagues that like players will bounce around, and they will start in leagues that are not those ones. They'll start in smaller ones. To bring this back to the Griffey conversation, I think that iconic players are going to see an uptick in their card prices based on this Jordan Kobe card, because the Jordan Kobe card got a lot of press, and I think that's going to bring people into the market. And when you're bringing people into sports cards that don't know anything about cards, they're going to gravitate towards the players that they know. So that's going to be the Messis, that's going to be the Ronaldos, that's going to be LeBron, that's going to be Brady, that's going to be Griffey. It's going to be all of these players that they know. So do I think overall we are going to see increases and decreases? Yeah, probably. But I think that is just one of the things about cards in this market in general, is that there's going to be ups and downs. You just have to figure out how to navigate through those time periods of when things are going to be changing rapidly sometimes. That's all we've got for today's show. Make sure you leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about today's topics. Also, make sure to come back here to the Sports Card Nonsense YouTube channel every day for daily nonsense. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.